3 years ago, I signed the papers on a small brick bakery in Clover Hill, Tennessee, and I cried in the parking lot afterward, not from sadness, but because no one had ever handed me anything in my life, and I had finally built something entirely my own. My grandmother had left me a modest inheritance when I was 22. Not enough to change my life overnight, but enough if I was careful, if I was patient. If I gave up every luxury for 2 years to put a down payment on a commercial space and a small apartment above it. I named the bakery Laurel & Co. I painted the sign myself. I learned how to do my own bookkeeping, my own inventory, my own everything. By the time I turned 28, the bakery was in the black. Not wildly profitable, but mine. Fully, legally, unmistakably mine. That was the version of myself I was when I met my husband. His name was Ryan. He came in on a Tuesday morning in October, ordered a lavender honey latte and a brown butter croissant, and left a $2 tip on a $4 order. He came back on Wednesday, then Thursday. By Friday, he asked if the owner ever came out from the back, and my employee Sarah pointed at me, flour on my apron, pencil behind my ear, and he laughed like that was the best surprise he'd ever gotten. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. I said yes on a rooftop in Nashville with my hands shaking and my heart completely open. He was warm and funny, and he made me feel like the most interesting person in any room. His sister, Diane, hugged me at the engagement party and told me I was exactly what their family needed. I believed her. I believed all of it. What I did not tell Ryan, not when we started dating, not when he proposed, not when we set the wedding date, was that Laurel & Co. was mine alone. He knew I ran a bakery. He knew I worked hard. But I never showed him the deed, never mentioned the business structure, never confirmed whether I was an employee or the owner. When he asked casually once, I smiled and said I wore a lot of hats. He laughed and let it go. I want to be clear about why I did this. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't a test, exactly. It was something quieter and harder to explain, a kind of self-preservation I had learned after years of watching people treat my ambition like an asset they could borrow. An ex-boyfriend had once hinted gently that if we ever moved in together, it made sense to put both our names on my lease for stability. A former friend had slowly stopped paying her share of our joint catering equipment after I stopped asking. I had worked too hard and given up too much to hand the most important thing I'd ever built to someone before I was certain, absolutely certain of who they were. So, I waited. I told myself I'd tell Ryan everything before the wedding. I just needed a little more time. We got married in April, in the courtyard behind the bakery. It was small and simple, 30 people, wildflowers, the smell of the bread I'd baked myself the night before. Ryan cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. His mother, Patricia, sat in the front row in a yellow dress, smiling the whole time. Diane stood next to me as my maid of honor, squeezing my hand. It was the happiest day of my life. The first 3 months of our marriage were good. Ryan had a remote job in project management that he did from the apartment above the bakery, and we fell into a comfortable rhythm. I went downstairs at 5 a.m. He brought me coffee at 9. We ate dinner together almost every night. I was getting close to telling him the truth about the ownership structure. I had drafted the conversation in my head a dozen times, and then I heard the phone call. It was a Thursday afternoon in late July. I had come upstairs early because I'd burned my hand on a sheet pan and needed the first aid kit. The apartment door was slightly open. Ryan was on the phone, sitting at the kitchen table with his back to the hallway, and I heard Diane's name on the screen before I heard anything else. I almost announced myself. I almost knocked on the doorframe and said, "Hey, I'm home early." But something made me stop, something I still can't fully name. An instinct, a weight in the air, and I stood very still in the hallway and listened. "She hasn't said anything about the paperwork," Ryan was saying. "Not once. I don't even think she has a lawyer." A pause. Then Diane's voice through the speaker, slightly tinny. "What about the LLC? Did you find anything?" "Nothing in her name online. But it has to be structured somehow. You don't run a place like that without some kind of entity. Well, find out. If it's a sole proprietorship, that's community property after 12 months of marriage in Tennessee. You just have to be patient. I know, Ryan. Diane's voice sharpened. Don't get soft on me. This was always the plan. You do your year, you establish the marriage, and then we file. Mom needs that money. The medical bills aren't going away. Another pause. Longer this time. I know, he said again. And he didn't sound conflicted. He sounded tired in the way that someone sounds tired of waiting, not tired of doing wrong. I don't remember walking back down the stairs. I don't remember the rest of that afternoon. I do remember sitting in the back of the bakery in my bakery, in the place I had built myself with my burned hand wrapped in a dish towel, thinking with strange calm clarity, I need a lawyer before I need anything else. I didn't cry that night. I made dinner. I asked Ryan how his day was. I watched him eat the pasta I'd cooked and talk about a project at work, and I thought about how good he was at this, how completely, seamlessly good, and I filed that information away like a document I would need later. The next morning, before the bakery opened, I called an attorney named Patricia Haynes, not the same Patricia, just a coincidence that made me laugh grimly in my car, who specialized in small business and family law. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she asked me 2 questions. Was the bakery legally in my name alone? And did I have documentation predating the marriage? Yes, I told her. And yes. Then here's what you're going to do, she said. What followed was 6 weeks of the most exhausting, terrifying, and clarifying work of my life. I pulled every document I had, the original deed of purchase, the LLC registration, the business bank account statements going back 3 years, the insurance policies, the lease agreements, the loan I'd paid off 18 months before I even met Ryan. Patricia Haynes built a file that was airtight and then made it more airtight. She explained that in Tennessee, property brought into a marriage as separate property, particularly if it remained in a single-party LLC, was protected, but documentation was everything. We made sure the documentation was everything. Meanwhile, I went home every night and made dinner and asked about his day. I want people to understand how strange that was, how it requires a particular kind of stillness to sit across from someone who is betraying you and simply wait. There were moments, small, unguarded moments, when Ryan was kind to me, when he brought me ibuprofen without being asked or left a note on the espresso machine saying you're my favorite person, and I'd feel the grief of it like a physical thing. Not because I doubted what I'd heard, but because he was real, and I had loved a version of him that was also real. And those 2 truths existed at the same time, and neither one canceled the other out. Diane came by the bakery twice during those 6 weeks. The first time, she ordered a coffee and asked how business was going, making careful conversation. And I smiled and said things were great. The second time, she brought her mother, Ryan's mother, Patricia, who held my hand and said she hoped I was adjusting well to married life, and that the family was so glad Ryan had found someone so grounded. I looked at Patricia's face and thought about Diane's voice on the phone. Mom needs that money. The medical bills aren't going away. I understood then that there was a real hardship underneath this real debt, real fear, and that it didn't change anything, but it made the grief more complicated. In the 6th week, I found the email. I had never touched Ryan's laptop before. I am not proud of the moment I made the decision to look. It felt like a line I was crossing, but I had already crossed so many lines in my head by then that this one felt almost small. I found a thread between Ryan and Diane going back 14 months. Before our wedding. Before our engagement. The first email was from Diane. The subject line was Tennessee property law, and she had pasted in a legal summary from a website. Ryan's response was, "So we need to be married for at least a year. That's fine. She's not going anywhere." I took a photo of the screen with my phone. Then I forwarded it to my own email, then immediately to Patricia Haynes. She called me within the hour. "This is what we needed," she said, and I could tell from her voice that she meant it. I filed for divorce on a Wednesday morning. Ryan was served at the apartment while I was downstairs opening the bakery. I know because Sarah texted me that she heard footsteps upstairs that stopped, then paced, then stopped again. I made a pot of coffee and kept working. He came down 20 minutes later. I was behind the counter. The bakery had 2 customers in it, a retired teacher named Gus who came every morning, and a young woman I didn't know who was reading by the window, and Ryan stood in the doorway holding the papers, and I looked at him, and I didn't say anything. He said, "We need to talk." I said, "I agree. Call Patricia Haynes. She's my attorney." He said my name. I said, "I have customers." The divorce proceedings took 4 months. Ryan contested initially on the grounds that the bakery had become a marital asset. Patricia Haynes presented the LLC documentation, the premarital registration, the unchanged ownership structure, and the emails. The emails were the thing that changed everything, because once there is a paper trail showing premeditated intent to marry for financial gain, the legal calculus shifts entirely. The court found in my favor on every relevant count. The bakery remained mine. No marital asset claim was upheld. Ryan and Diane were referred for investigation of civil fraud. I don't know what became of that. I didn't follow it closely, and my attorney advised me not to. What I know is that by December, the apartment above my bakery was empty again, and I had rented it to a 24-year-old nursing student named Carla, who leaves thank you notes on her rent checks. What I know is that I still open the bakery at 5 in the morning. What I know is that some mornings, fewer now, but still some, I think about the rooftop in Nashville and the way Ryan cried when he saw me. And I wonder how much of it was true and how much was performance, and whether it's possible for something to be both at the same time. I've stopped needing to answer that question. It doesn't change the ending. People ask me sometimes, friends, my mother, a therapist I started seeing in February, whether I regret not telling him the truth sooner, whether the secret I kept was any different from the secret he kept. I've thought about that more honestly than I probably have to. Here is what I believe. I kept a secret to protect something I built. He kept a secret to take it. Those are not the same thing, and I'm done pretending they might be in the interest of being fair. My grandmother used to say that the only thing worth building is something that can't be taken from you. She meant character. She meant integrity. She probably did not mean a small brick bakery in Clover Hill, Tennessee, but I have decided she would have approved. Laurel & Co. turns 4 years old next month. I'm adding a second display case and hiring a pastry chef. The lavender honey latte is still our most popular item, which gives me a complicated feeling I've mostly made my peace with. The sign above the door still reads the same. I painted it myself, and it isn't going anywhere.